Thanks very much for turning up and listening to me, and thanks for inviting me here. Can you hear me all right at the back? I can't hear myself, so that. I want to just give you a flavour of. Let's wait for some slides to. There we go. We talk about personalised nutrition and really about new ideas about food, and the details you can read in my books. Which you know about, but I think the main message is that the most important thing you can do for your health is undoubtedly make the right food choices. And once you realize that, that is extremely empowering. And it's also the most important thing you can do as an individual for climate change and our planet. And I think that message needs to get out more, and once we realize that we have these choices, we can make these big differences, don't have to depend on anyone else. It's just all about education, which fits in exactly with what we've been hearing. Now, 12 years ago, I got ill, and I still am a medical doctor, but I thought I knew what was right for me to eat. And I had a bit of a re-evaluation as I had this health crisis. And so I looked up on the internet, and this is what I saw. And interestingly, these haven't changed really in the last 12 years. When you go to these government NHS websites, it's about counting calories is the way to lose weight. All calories are equal. You avoid high-fat foods, avoid sugar and salt particularly. Replace it with starchy foods, are generally thought to be good. Swap sugar for artificial sweeteners. Never skip a meal. Keep grazing and snacking. And exercise is extremely good for weight loss. And one diet fits all, basically. And this applies to children and adults. And it turns out that virtually everything on this list is completely wrong. And there's no science to back it up, or there's been new science to completely disprove it. And so there are very few things in the core guidelines about our health that are good, apart from eat more fruits and vegetables and have more fibre. But a lot of this other stuff is no longer believed by most of the nutrition experts in the world. And this dogma, particularly on calories, being the central core foundation of how we should gauge food, is totally wrong and is being used to totally obscure the quality of food that we eat, and I think is itself responsible for the mass pandemic really, of obesity and diabetes in our countries. And I want to just go back to where I was. Whoops. I didn't mean go back. That's all right. This is obviously not working. Where was I 10 years ago? Also beginning this journey. I had for breakfast what I thought was a healthy meal, which was muesli, nice expensive brand, reassuringly expensive. I thought I would have some low-fat milk with it, which I thought was good. I'd have orange juice, which I was told full of antioxidants and vitamin C, and I'd have a bit of tea and some low-fat milk in that. And that was my breakfast. My lunch at Marks and Spencer's at the St Thomas's Hospital was a nice, healthy-looking bread sandwich or roll, looked like brown bread, malted, and it had tuna and sweet corn in it. And I would have often a fruit smoothie or a mango juice or something like that. And then I'd have a sort of pastry rice meal at the end of it. And during this time, I thought I was eating healthily. This is what most doctors would say a healthy meal. And I discovered I was putting on about 1 kilo a year. So not very hard to tell, but generally getting fatter. And when eventually I put a glucose monitor on me, I realized that I was getting these really big sugar peaks when I was having these foods. These were not good for me. Sugar peaks, we know, are bad. And I've totally changed my diet from this, based partly on a lot of it about the science that was I uncovered writing my books, but also about how I learned to personalize the diet. And that's what I'm going to tell you a bit about. Next. So we and our microbes and food are really complicated. We know that actual food chemicals, there's probably over 30,000 chemicals in the foods we eat, and yet we describe our food as only 4 things: calories, fats, proteins, sugars. Nonsense. That is total reductionist stuff that we should have thrown out 50 years ago. It's incredibly complicated, and by focusing on that, everyone ignores the detail of what those chemicals do. And we know that our bodies are very complicated, right? Most people accept that. And now we've got in the equation our gut microbes, which are themselves chemical factories. And so you've got to start thinking this is not trying to reduce this down to something simple and reductionist and easy. You've got to embrace the complexity and realize this is where we're going. Next. So the microbiome is something that was discovered about 20 years ago, really, as a healthy thing. Only really come to attention in the last 10 years. It's really new. It's basically a new organ in our body, where, as important as the heart or the liver, we can't live without it. And there are trillions of these microbes living inside us, which function as mini pharmacies. They convert the food that they're given, and they produce thousands of different chemicals which have a key influence on our immune system, our brain, our metabolism, our appetite, everything, from aging to allergies, etc. And so most of these are really beneficial. We've lost 50% of them in the last 100 years because of our modern way of life and our diet. Next. And I also discovered during these studies with this company I co-founded, Zoe, where I started wearing glucose monitors, eating these sugary, fatty muffins, that when you just have muffins to eat all day, as many people do, it's the equivalent, you can have the most horrible day of your life, which is what I had here. And this is my sugar spikes, as I was eating only muffins every 4 hours. And I've never felt my attention being so poor. I couldn't concentrate. I was trying to write a bit of one of my books, and I just really couldn't do anything. And I suddenly realized there is this real connection between your gut and your brain, which many of us don't fully appreciate until you really stress it. And this is what I saw, and this is what happens to many people having ultra-processed foods. They are just going for one spike and a dip. And we know that these dips are really important and affect your energy levels and affect your appetite. Next. It's incredible, really, that ultra-processed food has been around since the 1970s and it's gradually taken over, so that over 70% of the calories that children eat is now ultra-processed food. And yet we know virtually nothing about its effect on our health. All we are told is it's about the calories, it's about the sugar content, it's about the salt and the fat. And that makes it super easy for food industry to just say, well, we've reduced those, therefore it's healthy. No one's done a study because they've successfully blocked all this work by distracting nutrition departments around the world and lobbying government ministers to look away. But this is the first study, and it was only done in the US by a group that didn't need to get a grant. They were actually at the NIH. They did this study where they compared ultra-processed food given to volunteers for 2 weeks in a locked lab. They had to only eat there, and they either gave them the ultra-processed version or the home-cooked version. Equal calories, equal macronutrients, and in that time, they liked both groups liked both of them equally, and they did a crossover. But the ones eating the ultra-processed food ate another 300 to 500 calories a day. So it made them hungrier. It didn't satisfy them. Something turned on in their brains that made them overeat. And this is what's happening to us and our children because of this systematic change in our food system. Next. I won't go into this one. This is just the predict studies. Next, please. What we did start to look at personalisation is if you give everybody the same food, do they respond the same way? And that's what we've been told by governments, but it's very different. We did this for 1,000 people, the Zoe Predict study, gave everyone identical muffins, and it turns out there was a 10 to 20-fold difference in how people's metabolism responded to those identical muffins. And this told us, even in identical twins, we got different results. So it's not genetics, it's something else. And the microbiome is a big part of that, because all of us have very unique microbiomes. All of them, everyone in this room has a complete, some microbes in there that are totally unique to you, which means that you'll respond to food differently. So we need a personalised approach to know whether you're good at processing fats or carbohydrates or proteins. Next, please. And this is now reality. And next, these are the identical twins. And next, and you can now, we've gone from this research 5 years ago to a product so that people can test themselves. And what we're giving these test kits so that people test their blood sugar peaks, we test their fat peaks, and we test their microbes. And we're trying to point people towards diets that are healthier in order to reduce those sugar spikes, fat spikes, and improve their gut health. And that means no ultra-processed foods, it means a diversity of plants, and it's asking people to eat much more whole foods, and nothing's off the menu. And it doesn't mention calories once. So it's trying to change people's diets progressively using technology to nudge them towards these goals. And so far it's been very popular, and we had over 300,000 people sign up to go on these studies, although they are relatively expensive. You know, the initial starting cost is £250. So a lot of people want to do this kind of stuff, but I think the key is it's another way of educating people, and there's other ways we can educate. And Zoe has a nutrition podcast that's free, and we have other free apps and lots of free educational advice. Next, please. So I think, in summary, I think we should ban calorie counting, and we should really be moving, because A, it's really difficult, B, you can't actually, most people don't lose weight on a calorie restricted diet, and that's really important to realise. You do short term, your body forces you back to where you came and often overshoots. So that's why this billion-dollar industry is fooling us all. It's a complete con to do these 6-week diets. You have to have something sustainable in there. And as I said, it's a massive distraction against people talking about the quality of food. And we found you can get people on this course by removing the C word completely. The keys are also, even without personalisation, if you work with your gut and you teach people some basic principles, if you feed your gut microbes well, basically the rest will follow. Your health will improve, and you're also helping the planet. And I think this is really important. They're going together. Just like the microbes in your soil need nourishment properly, they need diversity, so do you. So these are brilliant paradigms for a much more holistic approach to food. That's why I would say 30 different plants a week. That includes nuts, seeds, herbs, spice mixes, and for me, coffee is also a plant, so, as is red wine. Fermented foods every day, and that doesn't mean children's yogurt. It means real fermented foods, and that's what we should be encouraging, without artificial sweeteners. We need to pick high polyphenol foods, and all these emulsifiers and artificial sweeteners are really bad for your gut microbes. So we need to get that message out there, particularly for kids that are most susceptible, because we do believe it makes them overeat, increases their sweetness seeking, and is generally a really bad training in terms of appreciating greater diversity and bitterness and all the interesting flavours we used to eat before these sweet foods came along. And I think these large-scale community studies, like we're starting to collect with the Zoe commercial kit, but also these voluntary studies with this community of 500,000 people we've got on the free app doing these studies, seeing if they work, is really important. So do remember, the most important choice you can do, the most important thing for your health is to pick the right foods, and with trillions of these microbes inside you, you'll never eat alone again.